I still remember the sound of that plate. Sharp. Sudden. Final. It started with one small thing. My mother sitting down at the dining table without asking. Zena froze. Her eyes narrowed like a warning light. Then her voice cut through the air. "You sat at the table without asking for permission?" Before I could blink, the plate flew. It hit the edge of the table, shattered against the floor, and sent soup flying across the room. The smell of lentils filled the air. Hot drops splashed on my shoes. My mother didn't move. She just stared at the mess spreading at her feet. Her hands shook, but she didn't speak. I clapped, half laughing, half angry, trying to make the tension disappear. "Bravo, babe," I said. "The old woman has to know her place." Even as the words left my mouth, I felt them cut deep. Not into her, into me. But I didn't stop. I kept pretending it was funny because that's what I always did when things got ugly. Zena stormed off to the kitchen for a towel, still muttering. My mother bent down slowly, trying to pick up the broken pieces. Her fingers were trembling, and a drop of blood formed where a shard had sliced her thumb. She didn't even notice. She just whispered, "It's fine. I'll clean it." Something inside me twisted. She looked small, like a guest in her own home. This was supposed to be our home. Mine, Zena's, and hers. She sold everything she had so we could buy this place. Yet here she was, cleaning the floor while I stood there watching. For a moment, silence filled the apartment. The only sound was the dripping soup sliding down the wall. Zena came back with a towel, stepped around my mother, and said, "Next time, wait to be invited." I should have said something. I should have told Zena to stop. But I didn't. I looked away instead. My mother rose slowly, wiped her hands, and walked toward her room without a word. Her back was straight, but I saw it, the quiet breaking inside her. Not anger. Not fear. Something deeper. When the door closed, Zena tossed the towel on the counter and sighed. "She always does this," she said. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. The image of my mother's shaking hands wouldn't leave me. That night, I lay in bed and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. The sound reminded me of that moment. The crash, the silence, the look in her eyes. Something changed that evening. Not just for her. For me too. Because when that plate shattered, so did something between us. After that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the sound of that plate hitting the floor. It didn't just break the dish. It broke something in the air, in the silence we'd been pretending was peace. I lay awake thinking about my mother, Amara Dubois. 67 years old. Soft voice. Tired eyes. And a kind of quiet that made you feel guilty if you stayed around her too long. When I was a kid, she wasn't like that. She was strong in her own way. She never shouted. She never complained. But she worked like the world depended on her hands. My father, Theonius, married her when she was 24. He was a practical man, steady, predictable, and never soft. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was usually to remind her what needed doing. "Coffee, Amara. Where's my shirt? The towel's still damp." And she'd answer the same way every time. "Yes, dear." Always gentle. Always patient. I used to think that was love. Now I'm not so sure. Their house was small but clean. Everything had its place. Mom woke before dawn, brewed his coffee exactly the way he liked it, then started breakfast. After he left for work, she would sweep, wash, fold, and fix. It never stopped. But she had her small joys. A tiny garden behind the kitchen, full of tomatoes and mint. A chipped mug that once belonged to her mother. Old paperbacks from flea markets that she'd read at sunset while sipping tea. Those moments were her world. She told me once, "Kareem, peace doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just sitting still and breathing." I didn't understand what she meant back then. Now I do. She lived her life like a soft whisper, steady, unseen, and necessary. My father was the voice everyone heard. She was the silence that made the voice possible. Even after I grew up and left home, she kept that same rhythm. When I visited, she'd ask if I'd eaten, not how I'd been. That's how she showed love, through service, not words. I thought that kind of love would last forever. But time wears down even the strongest habits. After my father died, something inside her dimmed. She still brewed the coffee, even though there was no one to drink it. She still folded the shirts that no one wore. Her silence stopped feeling peaceful. It started feeling lonely. That's when she called me and said she wanted to sell the house. She said she wanted to live with us, to be close again. Zena smiled when she heard it. I thought it was kindness. It wasn't. Looking back, I see it clearly now. Mom had spent her whole life serving others. But she didn't know that when she sold that house, she was giving away more than money. She was giving away the last piece of herself. My father's death came quietly. No drama. No warning. One morning, he just didn't wake up. I remember getting the call. Mom's voice was calm, too calm. She said, "He's gone, Kareem. He just stopped breathing." I didn't know what to say. What can you say to that? When I reached the house, it felt like the air had stopped moving. Everything was still, his shoes by the door, his coffee cup half washed, the faint smell of his cologne in the hallway. Mom was sitting on the couch, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. She didn't cry. She just kept whispering. He looked peaceful. We buried him 2 days later. The service was small. I stayed for a couple of hours, then left. Zena didn't come inside. She said funerals made her uncomfortable. I didn't argue. After that day, I barely called. Work got busy. Life moved on. At least mine did. Mom's didn't. That house became too big for her overnight. The walls echoed with everything that wasn't there anymore. The sound of his shoes, the low hum of the TV, the clink of 2 cups instead of 1. Now there was only 1. She still cooked dinner for 2. She'd plate his portion, then wrap it, saying, "Maybe tomorrow I'll eat it." But tomorrow never came. Sometimes she'd call and ask if I wanted to come by for tea. I always said, "Maybe next week, Mom. We're busy." Next week turned into months. Zena said she didn't like the smell of the old place. Too dusty, she claimed. I let her words become my excuse. Mom stopped calling as often. When she did, her voice was thinner, like she was running out of something. Air, maybe hope. She'd ask simple things. How's work? Are you eating enough? Never about herself. She never did that. Then one day she mentioned a letter. She said it came from the bank. The house is worth more than I thought, she said softly. $84,000. She said it like it was just a number, but I could hear the wheels turning in her mind. That night, I told Zena about it. She smiled, that sharp little smile she gets when she's already 2 steps ahead. She's lonely, Zena said. Maybe she could move in with us. Families should stay together. At the time, it sounded sweet, like a solution, like the right thing. But looking back, it wasn't kindness in her voice. It was calculation. And I didn't see it. I just saw an empty house and a mother trying to fill the silence with something that felt like family. If only I'd known that silence was about to get louder. It started with a phone call. Mom's voice sounded lighter that day. Almost hopeful. "Kareem," she said, "I've been thinking. Maybe I should sell the house. We could buy something bigger. A place where we can all live together. You, me, and Zena." I paused. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The idea felt strange, but also, right. She was lonely. I knew that. And I guess part of me wanted to believe this could fix everything. When I told Zena, she smiled right away. A wide, too perfect smile. "Oh, that's wonderful," she said. "Your mother shouldn't be alone. We can take care of her." Her voice dripped with sweetness. But behind that tone, I heard something else. Something sharp. She started talking about condos. Modern ones, with open kitchens and lots of light, she said. Not too far from the city. She said it like she already owned it. I nodded along, pretending I didn't notice the change in her face. She was already doing the math in her head. $84,000. That number had turned into a promise. The next week, we met Mom for lunch. She wore her best gray dress and that small gold brooch she always wore on special days. She looked nervous but excited. "I spoke with an agent," she said. "The sale could go through in a month. Then we'll buy something together." Zena reached across the table and took her hand. "That's so generous of you," she said softly. Mom smiled, her eyes wet with relief. For the first time in months, she looked happy. When the house finally sold, she held the check like it was a piece of her life, and I guess it was. $84,000. Her entire world, in one thin piece of paper. We went to the lawyer's office to make things official. Mr. Isaiah Sanchez. An older man with kind eyes and a careful voice. He read the documents slowly, line by line. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Du Bois, the deed will be in your and your wife's names?" I nodded. "It's simpler that way," I said. "Practical," Zena added quickly. Mom hesitated. Her eyes flicked between us, then back to the papers. "Does that matter?" she asked quietly. Isaiah frowned. "It means you'll have no legal claim to the property. Once you sign, it belongs entirely to them." Zena laughed softly. "Oh, please. We're family. It's just paperwork." Mom smiled at me, trusting, fragile. "I know," she said. "I trust my son." And she signed. Her hand trembled, but she didn't stop. When the pen lifted from the paper, I saw something change in her face. A flicker of doubt. Maybe even fear. But I said nothing. I told myself it was for the best. That we were doing the right thing. And maybe, at that moment, I even believed it. The day we moved into the new condo felt like a victory. At least, that's what I told myself. Zena was glowing, walking from room to room like she'd just won a prize. "This is perfect," she said, running her fingers along the white walls. "It's modern. Bright. Finally something that feels like us." I looked around. Everything smelled new. New paint. New leather furniture. New curtains that didn't belong to anyone yet. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a hotel room someone forgot to decorate. Mom stood by the door, holding her small box of things. It was all she had left. A few clothes, some books, and a framed photo of her and Dad. Her hands gripped the box like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Zena turned to her. "Your room's down the hall," she said, pointing to the smallest door. "It's cozy. You'll like it." Mom nodded. She didn't say a word. When she opened the door, I saw the space. No windows. Just a narrow bed and a small closet. The air felt heavy, like it hadn't been breathed in yet. "It's fine," Mom said quietly. She placed her things on the bed and started unpacking. I wanted to tell her we could switch rooms, but Zena's look stopped me. That kind of look that said, "Don't even think about it." The first few days passed quickly. Zena made lists, what Mom could do and what she couldn't. No cooking. No guests. No television in the living room. And she wasn't to sit at the main table unless invited. "She's old, Kareem," Zena said one night. "We have to keep things organized. You know how she gets in the way." I nodded. Not because I agreed. Because it was easier than arguing. Mom followed every rule. She moved quietly through the condo, like a guest who didn't want to bother the host. She washed her own dishes. She ate standing up by the kitchen counter. And she always smiled when Zena talked to her, even when the words were cold. Sometimes I'd pass her door late at night. The light would still be on. I could see her shadow through the crack. Sitting on the bed, staring at nothing. She never slept early anymore. I told myself she was adjusting. That she just needed time. But deep down, I knew the truth. She wasn't living with us. She was surviving around us. Every day, her silence grew heavier. And every day, my guilt grew with it. The condo was new. The walls were white. Everything looked perfect. But nothing about it felt alive. Time slipped away after that. Days started to blur into each other. Morning looked like evening. Every sound in that condo echoed the same way. Even silence had a rhythm. Mom kept to herself. She ate alone in the kitchen. Zena and I would sit at the dining table, just a few steps away, but it felt like she lived in another world. Sometimes I'd hear the soft clink of her spoon against a bowl while we were laughing about something else. She never joined in. She just sat quietly, like she didn't want to be seen. Zena noticed every move she made. If Mom walked too slowly, Zena sighed. If she cleaned, Zena found something wrong. "The counters are still greasy," she'd say. Or, "You missed a spot." Once she even said, "Can you not breathe so loud? It's distracting." Mom just nodded, never defending herself. I started getting used to it. That's what scared me the most. At first, I told myself Zena was just being strict. Then I told myself Mom didn't mind. But deep down, I knew both were lies. One night, I came home late. Zena was on the couch scrolling through her phone. The TV was off. Mom was standing by the sink, drying one plate at a time. I said, "Mom, you don't have to do that. Go rest." She smiled and said, "I'm fine, Kareem." But her hands were shaking. She looked tired in a way I couldn't fix. When she went to her room, I noticed something. Her dinner plate was empty, but the food on it looked cold. She hadn't eaten much. Maybe she was too nervous. Maybe she just didn't want to eat near us anymore. The next morning, I found Zena complaining again. "She's using too much soap. The bill's going to double at this rate." I didn't even answer. I just put on my shoes and left for work. It was easier than arguing. That night, when I came home, I saw her room light on again. She was sitting on the bed with her purse open beside her. Her face looked pale, tired. Her fingers moved slowly through old papers and folded receipts. Then she froze. I saw a small card between her fingers. White, worn, with faded print. Mr. Isaiah Sanchez, attorney at law. The same lawyer who handled the sale. The same man who'd warned her. She looked at that card for a long time. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she tucked it back inside and closed her purse. I stood outside her door, listening to the quiet. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was just still. That's when I realized something. She wasn't part of the family anymore. She was a shadow moving through our lives. A ghost in her own home. And I was the one who made her invisible. It happened on a Sunday. The day started quiet, but not peaceful. Zena had been in one of her moods. Every small thing bothered her. The sound of the TV. The way Mom folded towels. Even the smell of tea. By evening, the tension was thick. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to read something on my phone. Zena stood by the kitchen, arms crossed. Mom was washing the same cup over and over, like she didn't want to turn around. Zena's voice cut through the silence. "Maybe if you'd learned to live properly, Kareem wouldn't have to carry your weight." The cup slipped from Mom's hand. It didn't break this time. But something else did. The room went still. Mom turned slowly. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. She didn't say a word. She just dried her hands and walked to her room. The door closed softly, but the sound felt loud in my chest. That night, she didn't come out. Not for dinner. Not for water. Nothing. I knocked once. No answer. I left her alone. I told myself she just needed space. But later, I heard her voice. Soft. Shaking. On the phone. At first, I thought she was praying. Then I heard a name. Mr. Sanchez. My stomach tightened. I moved closer to the door. Her voice was low, tired. "I don't know if you remember me," she said. "Amara Du Bois. We met when I sold my house." A pause. Then a man's calm voice on the other end. "Yes, Mrs. Du Bois. I remember you." She sighed. "I think I made a mistake." He spoke gently. "Do you still have the papers I gave you?" "I have your card," she said. But I signed everything over. I have nothing left. There was another long pause. Then Mr. Sanchez said something that made her gasp. Mrs. Du Bois, I prepared a second set of documents that list you as the legal owner. I never filed them. I wasn't supposed to. But something told me to keep them. Maybe I felt guilty. Mom didn't speak for a while. When she did, her voice trembled. So, what does that mean? It means, he said, if you sign these papers, the condo will legally belong to you. We can make it right. Her breath hitched. Not in anger. Not in disbelief. It sounded like relief. For the first time in months, I heard something new in her tone. Hope. Not revenge. Not pride. Just quiet, trembling hope. The next morning, I noticed her eyes were different. She didn't look broken anymore. She looked awake. And for reasons I didn't understand yet, that scared me more than anything. A week passed after that call. Something changed in the air, though I couldn't name it. Mom moved differently. Quiet, but not afraid anymore. Her steps were slower, deliberate, like every movement had meaning. Zena didn't notice at first. She was too busy planning a dinner party for her friends. She called it a celebration of stability. Whatever that meant. I think she just wanted to show off the condo. That evening, the place was spotless. Candles lit. Music soft. Expensive plates and silverware that we almost never used. Zena wore a red dress and a smile that looked rehearsed. I poured drinks, trying to stay out of her way. Mom stayed in her room most of the day. Zena told her, "Don't come out. We're entertaining guests tonight. It's not for you." Mom only nodded. She didn't argue. When the guests arrived, the condo filled with laughter and perfume. Everyone complimented the space. Zena basked in it like sunlight. I pretended to enjoy it too. It was easier than thinking. Dinner started. 6 people around the table, Zena in charge of every word. Then, out of nowhere, I heard footsteps. Slow, steady, coming from down the hall. Every head turned. Mom appeared in the doorway. She was dressed simply but beautifully. Gray silk, her hair tied neatly back. There was something regal about her posture, something I hadn't seen before. She smiled politely and said, "Good evening." Zena's face froze. Her smile cracked. "What are you doing out here?" she hissed. "I told you to stay in your room." Mom didn't flinch. She walked closer, calm as ever. "I thought I'd sit at the table," she said. "I helped pay for it, after all." The room went silent. You could hear the clock ticking. Then Zena snapped. She grabbed her plate, raised it high, and threw it against the floor. The sound was deafening. Pieces scattered everywhere. "You sat at the table without asking for permission," she shouted. Mom didn't move. She reached into her bag, pulled out a few folded papers, and placed them on the table beside the broken pieces. Her voice was steady. "You're the guests now," she said. "This condo is mine." For a second, no one breathed. Then one of the guests stood up, whispered something, and left. The others followed, slipping out one by one. Zena just stood there, shaking, her face pale. I stared at my mother. Her hands were still, her eyes clear. It was the same silence I'd seen before, but this time it didn't look weak. It looked powerful. The power had shifted. And deep down, I knew nothing in that house. It happened so fast I barely saw it. One moment, Mom was standing by the table. The next, Zena lunged at her. She screamed something I can't even remember now. It was all noise, rage, panic, breaking glass. Zena's hand struck out, hard. Mom stumbled backward. Her foot slipped on one of the broken plates, and she fell. The sound of her body hitting the floor still echoes in my head. Then everything went silent. For a moment, nobody moved. Even Zena froze, staring at what she'd done. Mom didn't make a sound. She just lay there, her face pale, her hand clutching her side. I ran to her. "Mom, can you hear me?" She nodded weakly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I think my leg," she whispered. I could see the pain in her eyes. Zena started shouting again. She slipped. It was an accident. But I wasn't listening. I was already on the phone, calling for an ambulance. When the paramedics arrived, I stood in the corner, useless. Mom cried out as they lifted her onto the stretcher. Her face twisted with pain, but she still looked at me. Not angry, just disappointed. And that hurt worse than anything else. At the hospital, the doctor said she had a fractured hip and needed surgery. I sat outside the room for hours, my hands shaking. Zena tried to talk to me, but I couldn't even look at her. Something inside me had finally broken. For years, I'd told myself she was just strong-minded, that she meant well, that she only wanted things neat and proper. But now, watching my mother in that hospital bed, I saw it for what it really was. Cruelty. Cold. Calculated. And I let it happen. The police came the next morning. One of the guests had reported the fight. They questioned Zena, asked about the plate, about the fall. I didn't say a word in her defense. When they took her away, she screamed my name. I didn't answer. I went back inside. Mom was awake after surgery. She looked small under the blankets, but her eyes were clear. I sat beside her and tried to speak, but the words got stuck. Finally, I said, "Mom, I'm so sorry." She looked at me for a long time. Then she said softly, "You didn't lose your mother, Kareem. You threw her away." Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired. And that made it worse. I sat there, holding her hand, realizing that sorry would never be enough. Not for what I'd allowed. Not for what I'd ignored. That night, as she slept, I promised myself something. I wouldn't let her be invisible again. Not ever. That belonged to me. 6 months later, everything looked different. The condo felt brighter somehow. Warmer. Peaceful. Mom was walking again, slowly but steadily. Therapy took time, but she never complained. She moved like someone who had learned how to start over. Careful, but determined. Her cane clicked softly against the floor, a quiet reminder that she was still here. I visited once or twice a week. Never unannounced. I didn't want to startle her, or worse, make her feel like a guest again in her own home. Every time I walked through that door, the smell of mint and fresh flowers filled the air. She had turned the place into something new, simple, calm, alive. Zena was gone. The divorce was quick and quiet. I didn't fight it. There was nothing left to fight for. When I told Mom about it, she just nodded. No surprise. No satisfaction. Just understanding. She said, "Sometimes, peace costs everything you thought you needed." I didn't answer. I just sat there, listening to the ticking clock and the sound of her watering the plants. She spent hours on that balcony. The garden had grown, small pots lined in perfect rows, green leaves reaching toward the light. That little space was her world now. Her hands moved gently through the soil like she was touching something sacred. We talked sometimes, but not about the past. It was too heavy, too full of things that couldn't be undone. Instead, she asked about my work, my health, if I was eating well. Still a mother. Always a mother. I brought groceries. Fixed a few things around the condo. She never asked for help, but she never refused it either. And every time I left, she'd walk me to the door, smiling the same calm smile she used to wear before everything broke. One afternoon, as I was leaving, I turned back. She was on the balcony, watering the mint plants. Sunlight touched her hair. She looked peaceful, almost radiant. Then I heard her voice, soft but clear. "This silence is finally mine." I stood there for a moment, not wanting to move. Her words hit me hard, not because they were sad, but because they were true. The silence that once hurt her now belonged to her. It wasn't empty anymore. It was freedom. She didn't need anyone's permission now. Not to sit at the table. Not to speak. Not even to be happy. As I walked away, I realized something. She hadn't just survived what we did to her. She had rebuilt herself out of it. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just her son. I was her witness.